Say small. Second time.
I'm sure the 18th century must have valued any concert far more highly than we do.
One, stamp, dum, dum. Chamber style.
I think they knew there was little chance of a repeat, that some of the music they would be hearing for the first time ever from a composer who might never be there again.
The music of the 18th century is important to English conductor Christopher Hogwood.
Yeah. But it just sounds like you absolutely want to finish the argument.
The music of Haydn and Handel and Mozart. Music we are familiar with, or at least think we are. But what exactly did audiences of 200 years ago hear? Christopher Hogwood believes in recreating the 18th century sound for 20th century audiences. Christopher Hogwood founded the Academy of Ancient Music nearly 15 years ago. The group uses authentic instruments, wooden winds, hand-stopped horns, gut strings. These produce a crisper, lighter sound than modern instruments. Feels nice. It sounds like a wooden flute.
It does.
Has a lovely woody quality. Now, if I did the same thing on this flute, which is modern, first of all, the same fingering gives me a different sound.
Pitch.
Well, yes, it's in fact I think a whole tone.
Yes.
That was the same. So it's actually a whole. Very different feel to it, and
Heavily mechanized.
heavily mechanized indeed. One music critic has said that the early music movement as a whole is the most exciting innovation in the performance of the standard repertory. But others dismiss it as a fad, saying that if our modern instruments had been available to Beethoven and Mozart, they surely would have used them.
There's no morality about this. Nobody says you should or shouldn't in any of this, but I think there are so many wonderful performances around that have taken the immediately available modern materials. For it to be necessary for somebody who feels convinced of the worthwhileness of the original ingredients to concentrate on that angle, and that's my approach to it.
How do you feel about the fact that so many of your performances are in halls that are much more vast than were used in the 18th century and different acoustically?
I feel that you haven't got much choice.
While Hogwood is best known as the leader of the Academy of Ancient Music, he has appeared with mainstream orchestras throughout the world, conducting both classical and modern works.
Yeah, we have to clear this end so that the oboes can be in, because if that'd be sort of a...
His rise has been meteoric, even if the early music movement has not always been universally embraced.
Just 37.
At first, there was a sort of general crankiness about it. Oddities, you know.
One of the things that slug it makes us feel...
But once it got into, oh, they're playing Mozart, and what's more, they can play those notes that we find quite tricky, and it goes quite fast, too, and it's quite exciting. The questions changed, not to being, you know, why do you bother, but how do you do it, and what are the reasons?
Hogwood has his American base with the Handel and Haydn Society in Boston. He has just finished his first year there as artistic director.
The two names, Handel and Haydn, of course, are an immediate catalyst to a lot of good feelings, as far as I'm concerned. It's the two of the areas where I've done most research and most work. Athalia is the first sort of blockbuster oratorio that Handel wrote. He'd more or less invented this form because he discovered the English liked a religious message that made them feel good, coupled with all the normal excesses of the opera house.
Christopher Hogwood's home is in Cambridge, England. His scholarly side is nurtured there. He has written several books on music, including an enormously successful biography of Handel. And, as befitting an early music specialist, he collects early keyboard instruments.
The upright version of the piano is this bookcase English piano, and it would have been familiar to people like Jane Austen for domestic music parties. You even have these little scallops that you pull out to stand the candles on. This is a virginal, which would have been the type of keyboard instrument familiar in the 16th, 17th century to the English and the Dutch. Very elaborately decorated, so it makes a fine piece of furniture, and with a very distinctive sound all its own. It, of course, is plucked. The strings are plucked rather than hit with hammers, which is the technique of the modern piano. The alternative way of producing sound, of course, is that of the clavichord. This instrument here is a late 18th century clavichord in very elaborate chinoiserie design built in Hamburg. And there the strings are just touched by small pieces of metal, the tangents, and as a result the sound is exquisitely soft.
Also do enormous amounts of contemporary music. Do you have to particularly shift gears when you're about to conduct, say, Stravinsky?
No, I think the principles at work with 20th century music and a lot of 18th century music can be very similar. I still think, though, in all periods of music, you follow the same concepts. I mean, I'm very much one for faithfulness to the composer's text. If Stravinsky asked for 5 violins in Pulcinella, I will use 5 violins in Pulcinella, even though the orchestral management will say, big hall, you should use 20, you know. I think the obligation is to stick with what the composer said.
Is the authentic Christopher Hogwood? Are you a Renaissance man in 18th century clothes? I mean, how do you see yourself?
I certainly don't see myself as somebody in the 20th century wishing they existed in the 18th. I think this is a foolish compromise and this time warp idea. Nor do I wish the modern audience to be translated backwards. This is not what we're dealing in. It's pulling that work forwards into the present, where it belongs, but should belong here without having to forego its original colours and exist in a sort of camouflage in order to be acceptable to the 20th century.